the 1980s, sci-fi movies were really about space exploration, science gone wrong, and future dystopian societies. And that's why today we're going to be talking about the 10 best sci-fi movies before the 1980s.
What was that?
A meteor. One of the biggest.
Hey, how's it going, everyone? Thank you for tuning in to another episode of Figure Out Films. My name is Chris, as always, and I'm so excited, friends, that you're here because we are talking about sci-fi, my favorite genre, probably next to horror. Can't ever decide which one I like, so I naturally love the ones that blend them together, which we will be talking about today. If you're new to this channel, please consider hitting that subscribe button. Check out our latest videos. We did successfully hit the 500 mark, so now we just got to get to 1,000, everyone. So continue with that support. I love seeing the comments down below. Thankfully, the content that's been put out lately has been going along well with most of the viewers, so I'm going to continue to hopefully do that. If you ever like to have me do a ranking or a top 10, please let me know down in the comments below. If you're returning again, thank you so much for the support again. But today I am excited because we are talking about sci-fi. We're talking about pre-1980s, and the reason being, I feel like some of the best sci-fi movies are usually post-1980s movies talked about, and we'll save that maybe for another video and another day if you'd like to see that. But I really want to focus on earlier sci-fi movies because I feel like those kind of get shoved on the side when you got the things like the Terminator, you got modern sci-fi movies. But like, what about like these early ones that set the foundation for some of these movies? And a lot of times these more modern movies adopt a lot from these older movies. I said that I love early 50s sci-fi movies. I think the 1950s is such an underrated decade for movies, but especially when it comes to the sci-fi genre. The interesting thing is before the 1980s, a lot of the sci-fi that was going on at the time were horror movies related to space exploration, science gone wrong. Again, this is the Cold War and experiments are going on and paranoia of like nuclear war. So we get things like giant cockroaches, giant monsters, and things like that. And then we also get future dystopian worlds, things like Soylent Green, Logan's Run, things like that, where we think society is on the brink of destruction. And I think that's super interesting to see in a 2024 lens when we watch things from the 1970s and earlier on. And that's just some of the stuff that I really enjoy about this. So let's see what movies are in that top 10. Honorable mentions, just could not fit them in, but that's gonna be Jean-Luc Godard's Alphaville. Been meaning to watch this for a long time, eventually got around to it. Very, very cool 1960s French new wave neo-noir sci-fi movie, again about a dystopian future. I wrote a review on it on Letterboxd. If you want to check that out, I'll have it down in the comments below. Alphaville, very surprisingly interesting from Godard. Him and I have been having a very weird relationship when it comes to filmmaking, but I think Alphaville is worthy of a watch. I think it's a little dated in some aspects. I think it's more of a noir than sci-fi, but it is dystopian, so I recommend that. And then finally, first time watch, 2001 A Space Odyssey. Did watch this on the 4K, and the 4K is beautiful. I do have to admit, it's I see why people love and gush on how awesome this movie looks. I really like the middle part of the movie, but it's just a lot of, I don't know, I just don't really gel with it. It's a little too slow. Some of it makes sense, some of it doesn't for me. And I'm all about visuals, and I get that, but I need a strong narrative or some strong inclination of a message. And here it's just like a lot of, I guess, up to your imagination. And I don't know. I appreciate it, but it can't be my top 10. But I gotta, let you know it's not gonna be in there. Coming in at number 10, I have Planet of the Vampires, a movie directed by Mario Bava. Mario Bava, the GOAT, one of the best in my opinion with horror so far for me. Mario Bava's Planet of the Vampires. If there isn't a movie that influenced Ridley Scott for Alien and it's not this, then I'm curious to know what it was, because Planet of the Vampires really is just it's just like the blueprint for Alien, honestly. And instead of an actual one Alien, it's about this species that are, I don't know if they're even considered vampires, or more like people who take over the bodies and invade. And it has one of the coolest endings I've seen in a sci-fi movie. But I got to give love to Planet of the Vampires. All atmosphere. I think you should all check that out if you get the chance. Coming in at number 9, I have War of the Worlds 1953. And I have to say, I was blown away by this movie. I didn't know what I was expecting going into it, but I am pleasantly surprised with how great the filmmaking was for this movie. The visuals were astonishing. Very simple story. Aliens invade the world, and they go to a small town in California, and we think they're okay and they're nice, but in reality, they're here for world domination. I'm very surprised with how dark it gets for a 1953 movie. Again, I don't know why I say that surprisingly when a lot of movies before the 1980s were actually very dark as well. And this is in color, and it's gorgeous in color. It teeters between black and white for the past during World War II, and then in the color for this more futuristic look. And honestly, if I was a World War II vet and I went to go see this, I'd be scared out of my mind because it shows so much destruction in the world. And I guess this is kind of a way to show that the Cold War could lead to that kind of destruction similar to what we saw in World War II. Also, I just love the not the score, but the sound design is great. I think the aliens sound terrifying in their spaceships. The production values in this is great. I love the RGB lights that are constantly flashing to show that there's danger. The characters in this movie are, they're passable. They're nothing great. I barely remember their names, but to be honest, I love the paranoia that this movie makes. The Steven Spielberg remake, I did enjoy, although that is mostly a post 9/11 movie. This one I think is my preferred watch, and I look forward to watching this on rewatch. So yeah, check out War of the Worlds if you haven't. It's gonna be on sale in July, probably with a Criterion sale. So I definitely would recommend picking this up. And I do know it does have a 4K, but I was pleasantly surprised with this one. Coming in at number 8, I gotta show some love to this production company because every time I watch one of their movies, it's a banger. And for this movie, I was very, very blown away. And the fact that it's the first movie from them, I mean, God, they didn't have to go this hard, but that is with Curse of Frankenstein. Peter Cushing as is Baron Frankenstein, and then you get Christopher Lee as the monster. Paul and Frankenstein are buddies. They're scientists, and Peter Cushing wants to take it a little too far. He's got a god complex, and I gotta admit, because if you've ever watched a Hammer movie, you know that the productions are great. The acting's top-notch, and this movie sets the tone for that. And honestly, even though, Christopher Lee's Dracula in the later movies is so iconic, I do like him as this Frankenstein. He kind of makes it his own. He's not doing a Boris Karloff impersonation. I genuinely think he's a pretty terrifying looking Frankenstein, but to be honest, even though it's called The Curse of Frankenstein and we think about the monster, this movie's all about the Baron. He is such a bastard, and I love it for it. Maybe one of my favorite protagonists, mostly because he's also an antagonist. I mean, he's trying to screw over his buddy who loves his cousin. He's, got a woman pregnant, and he goes and kills her. He goes and waits to kill a famous scientist to steal his brain. It's just all over the place. The movie is insanely dark. It is so, like the expression of like taking off the white glove. I feel like this movie's metaphorically taking that clean sheet of like the Universal monsters, which they weren't very squeaky clean. But this movie kind of, at the time, feels like it's giving it like a rated R cut of the original Universal monsters. And I really enjoy that. And again, Peter Cushing, to be more of an evil character in this movie versus his Van Helsings from the later Dracula movies is a breath of fresh air. I kind of prefer him to be an antagonist because he plays it so well. It's very reminiscent to what he'll become with Grand Moff Tarkin. I do recommend you watch The Curse of Frankenstein and you watch it in this Warner Archive Blu-ray because the transfer is amazing. It is a 4K scan and you get 3 different aspect ratios. That's a lot of bang for your buck. And you get a lot of good bonus features as well. Definitely recommend checking this movie out. Coming in at number 7, this is a movie that when I stumbled upon it, it was just a late night drinking movie for me when I was living alone. And honestly, I stumbled upon a classic for me. I put it lower on the list, but it's just the bottom of the list is so awesome as well. I just gotta have to put it here. That is another 1950s movie, specifically 1959. This is The Angry Red Planet. Sci-fi movie. Very interesting direction because this is shot with Cinemagic, and what they do is they use stencils for some of these creatures, like specifically this one. And they draw it and then they film it. And it kind of looks like almost puppeteering in a way. It's scientists looking for outside life of Earth, and they stumble upon the Angry Red Planet, and they find that it's completely hostile. There's even society there, but it's pretty much abandoned. It's very chilling. There's a lot of isolation, terrifying creatures trying to kill these astronauts. And then you find out that the society that is here is actually bent on taking over Earth. And the ending is pretty chilling, I'm not going to lie. I very much enjoy The Angry Red Planet. It's a late night Roger Corman movie to watch. I don't think he actually produced this movie, but it has that feel, like one of those late night drive-in movies to go check out. I highly recommend you check this out. Don't be dissuaded because it is in like this red filter throughout most of the movie. I think it's a really cool design for production for this movie, and I don't see a lot of movies have that kind of creativity. So I highly recommend you check out The Angry Red Planet. And now moving on to number 6, again, another classic movie, is another movie that I absolutely enjoy. I think everyone should watch this movie, and including its remake. But that is the original 1958 The Fly. Vincent Price stars in The Fly, again, sci-fi movie where experiments go wrong. Vincent Price stars as the brother of a scientist where an experiment goes wrong, trying to do teleportation in his basement of his house. A fly accidentally goes into the machine while he's in there, and they accidentally turn matter together, becoming the fly creature. Genuinely a terrifying movie, and the sadness that follows this movie as well, with the scientist and his family trying to decide, is he able to communicate? Is he human or is he actually an insect? Very chilling, scary at times with the score. And for a movie like this, you don't need a lot of big production sets because most of the time it takes place in the basement and in the house, which is beautiful, but it's all about the characters. In this movie, in this case, the characters are all enjoyable. It's a genuinely tragic movie, seeing the scientist lose his family and his insanity as well. There's a scene in the movie where he tells his family to kill him, and because his head is the fly, and it's very scary. When you think about like movies like Psycho and like those horror movies that are like, they shouldn't be that scary or that dark for its time, but they genuinely were. The Fly is one of them. I think everyone should check out The Fly. And that ending is so iconic as well and chilling. Did an episode podcasting with my buddy Daniel from the Cobwebs on The Fly, and I highly recommend, if you can get the Scream Factory box set of The Fly series, get it. So you can watch this, its sequels, and then the remake and its sequel as well with David Cronenberg. But yeah, 1958's The Fly. I gotta include the big G. I know it's a big monster, but this one is more sci-fi, and here's why. At number 5, I have 1972's Godzilla versus Gigan. Godzilla versus Gigan, the reason I have that at number 5 is it's a genuinely cool sci-fi action movie. So it starts off with these cockroach alien beings who basically take over other impersonating human bodies, and they're bent on world domination because their planet died and they're starving. And they realize that the best way to go ahead and conquer the world is through corporate greed and taking over this theme park. I believe it's a theme park, and they assist the help of the alien space chicken with blades as hands, Gigan, along with the space alien 3-headed monster, Ghidorah. And they know that if I remember correctly, this is the first time we see a 2v2, because in this case, Godzilla is summoned with his buddy who he used to fight against in Godzilla Raids Again. He has Anguirus with him. And the real cool thing about this movie is that the human characters I generally do think are great in this movie. We have a manga artist. He's very young, trying to expose the corruption from this company that shows that they're not actually human, but they're actually cockroaches. And we know that because they're insect-like due to like the shadowing with the camera work when they're exposed. You see the outline of the shadow of like these alien insect beings, and they're pretty creepy and terrifying in a lot of scenes. And our characters, they go about trying to expose it and then also help in assisting Godzilla and Anguirus versus Gigan and Ghidorah. Most of the movie takes place in the nighttime. I think is really cool. It kind of almost feels like an espionage film at times. Genuinely enjoy this movie a lot. And also the monster designs, they're space monsters going against human made monsters in Anguirus and Godzilla, and just going 2v2 against each other is great. It's pretty bloody at times too, so it's a pretty violent Godzilla movie. I think Gigan and Ghidorah are maybe some of the most iconic monsters of Godzilla. And of course, this is the 1970s that, we're past the cool kid-friendly Godzilla. The adults wanted Godzilla again, and I did too. So we got Godzilla vs. Gigan at number 5. Coming in at number 4, it's no secret for people who know me in my inner circles that I absolutely love this movie. It's an animated French sci-fi movie that is Fantastic Planet. My God, 1973. This movie is insanely unique. I love the animation style of this movie. Basically, it's about an alien species comes to, we assume, some sort of primitive Earth, and what they have done as they basically have conquered the Earth. And or do we know if it's futuristic or it's way in the past? You have to watch a movie to find out. But we find out that the humans called gnomes or ohms, excuse me, are basically treated as sort of like pets, like little hamsters for these giant alien beings known as the drags. Basically, what's going on is that there's a civil war among the ohms, which are the humans, trying to get independence and freedom from the drags because they're huge, towering beings. And they don't like to be dressed up. They don't like to be treated like pests almost. And then what you find out is eventually that Terra, the main character, one has to be a Paul Atreides of sorts and rally up all the humans, and then eventually turn against the Drogs for freedom. Basically, it's a very interesting movie with a lot of unique alien-looking creatures, a cool jazzy score for the '70s as well. This movie is a can't miss. I highly recommend this movie. Maybe go in with an open mind because this movie is really crazy. It's very psychedelic, but man, it's just right up my alley. I really love this movie so much. I highly recommend people check it out and watch it. I think the animation is just so cool and unique. Very reminiscent of like a Ralph Bakshi type of animation as well. Highly recommend checking this out on the Criterion. Coming in at number 3, debatably my favorite Universal monster, depending on the day of the week, I have at number 3, the most sci-fi-esque, that is Invisible Man. The Invisible Man, played by Claude Rains, who I absolutely love in this role, and I just love Claude Rains in general, who was also the father to the Wolfman in the Wolfman movie, plays here the Invisible Man, which I have represented as my NECA figure, which I absolutely love. Basically, he finds out through experiments that he can turn himself invisible, coined the term the Invisible Man can rule the world. His mind is altered by the potion that he has drank to turn invisible. It's corrupting his mind without him realizing it. He's becoming more mad. He's becoming more murderous as well, and evil intent. And I love this movie because it's so fast, it's so quick, and the Invisible Man is genuinely terrifying. He's very much aware of what endless possibilities he has to be in control of everyone and how to escape his consequences for his actions. He kills a guy for being an idiot. I love the aspect when he reveals himself to an old friend of his, and it just doesn't feel like the Invisible Man actually trusts him. So you never know when he's stalking or nearby, and that's one of the great things that this Universal Monster movie does well, is you just don't know when he's around, and when he is there, you're scared. I love his maniacal laugh as well. I love how the people closest to him want to save him, but he just can't accept that he needs to be saved. I genuinely love this movie so much as well. Highly recommend everyone watch this movie. It's one of the best Universal Monster movies, and it's my pick for number 3. Coming in at number 2, I'm cheating a little bit because, if you watch my ranking of the Star Wars movies, this one isn't very high. But I do have 1977's Star Wars here on VHS. 1977 Star Wars, this is basically where it began for me with sci-fi. People argue this isn't sci-fi, it's more of a fantasy sci-fi movie, but it's still sci-fi. You get droids, you get aliens, you get spaceships, you get this cool space story, you get Chewbacca, Han Solo. You understand what the Force is in this movie. You get to see all these cool alien creatures in the cantina. You get Grand Moff Tarkin, Darth Vader, the Death Star. What do I have to say about 1977 Star Wars? It hasn't been said before, but this movie is awesome for the time when it shows how cool the special effects could be. George Lucas really hit it out of the park on this one, so I got to give it credit at number 2 for me. One of the best sci-fi movies made. And then coming in at number 1, again, no surprise for those who stick with this channel, but number 1 for me is Ridley Scott's 1979 classic Alien. Again, in space, no one can hear you scream. It's funny that this list was the best sci-fi movies before 1980. This movie, at number 1, released 1979. A movie I think that kind of represents this whole list in this video in general, where it borrows a lot and takes inspiration by a lot of great earlier sci-fi movies, and I think does them to perfection with a little bit of a better budget, great technical aspects, and honestly, I think a lot of genuine love for the craft. I think Ridley Scott makes this movie, and we don't realize it unless you watch a lot of these movies. It's almost like a love letter to some of those 1950s, 1960s monster sci-fi movies, and probably explains why it's my number one and one of my all-time favorite movies. I highly recommend, if you haven't seen Alien, to check this movie out, please. But yeah, I'm gonna have to wrap it up with number one being Alien. In space, no one can hear you scream. And there you have it. Those are my 10 best sci-fi movies before the 1980s. What were some of your favorites? What are some that you have checked out that you agree with? What are some that I missed that I should be checking out? Please let me know down in the comments below. If you'd like to see me do my top 10 sci-fi movies in the 1980s and after, let me know so I can work on that as well. Thank you all for tuning in. If you're new to this channel, please consider subscribing for more awesome movie rankings, top 10s, and figure reviews as well. My name is Chris here at Figure Out Films, and remember, if you are not showing love to the sci-fi genre, do you really care about cinema? Other than that, I'll see you next time.